What's up, guys? Okay, so I'm back today with another video. Today it's going to be similar to one of the videos I did in the past. It's going to be another video. It's going to be over the UFC basically, and more specifically it's going to be the Mount Rushmore of the UFC. So what four fighters do I think did the most to help build the UFC, to help raise the competition level, to help overall represent the UFC? What four fighters really did what they needed to do to get this job done? As for building the UFC and building everything about it, competition, skill, winning, all of that, what four fighters did the most? I'm about to list them. And that's what this video is over. Stay tuned. Here we go. All right, guys. So first on the list for the top four UFC fighters of all time, the Mount Rushmore of UFC fighters, the first face on Mount Rushmore is going to be none other than Royce Gracie. Now, why did I pick Royce Gracie? Well, I mean, if we just look back at the facts, okay, Royce Gracie fought in the UFC, in the early UFC in like the 1990s. In UFC 1, he won it. UFC 2, he won it, and then in UFC 4 he won it. And this was back when it was tournament style, meaning you had to win 3 fights in one night, and there were no weight classes. So you could have a 180 pounder fighting a 230 pounder basically. And what that means is that Royce Gracie was extremely undersized compared to his opponents, and you're about to see in this video, you can see that Ken Shamrock is his opponent. Ken Shamrock is also a great UFC fighter, high level, and Royce Gracie completely picks him apart, and he wins the tournament 3 fights in one night, and he did it multiple times. Not many UFC fighters can say they did that, and then they can't even get the opportunity to do that now. And I don't think that they would want that opportunity, because 3 big fighters that are bigger than you in a no weight fight, well, that's tough. And as you can see in this video, Royce Gracie is just picking everybody apart. I mean, you could see those leg kicks earlier when he was using those leg kicks to the body. I mean, who does leg kicks to the body when they're on bottom? But hey, that's Royce Gracie, and that's why he's the first member on the Mount Rushmore of UFC fighters, in my opinion. Alright, guys, so now after Royce Gracie, the next person or the next UFC fighter that I feel like should be on the UFC Mount Rushmore is none other than Jon Jones. How can you leave Jon Jones off this list? He is the best to ever done it. Yes, he's had his issues outside of the cage, and he's got his baggage and his demons, but no other fighter has been as dominant as this guy. And I think, without a doubt, I mean, you can see by the video, I mean, he's an animal. He took everybody out. He cleared out his division. Now he's in the heavyweight division. He beat one of the best heavyweight fighters most recently. And on top of that, I mean, he's never lost. He had 1 disqualification. Look at that. He's got beautiful wrestling. No one is better wrestling, except for maybe one other person that is on this list, or that is on the Mount Rushmore of the UFC. I mean, we can see in this video right here, I mean, he's just doing mad damage. He took out Gustafsson, very well-rounded fighter. He took out Lyoto Machida. He took out Shogun. He took out Rampage. He took out Chael Sonnen. He took out, and the list just goes on and on. He's beaten everybody. Dominic Reyes. He's beaten just everyone. And, I mean, he had 1 loss, and it was disqualification because of downward elbow. But, I mean, other than that, this guy, he's dominant. No one else comes close except for maybe one other fighter on this list. And that is why I had to go with Jon Jones. There was no question about it. He had to be on the UFC Mount Rushmore. Everything that he's done for the business, he's a good sell for fights, and he's just overall had to be on Mount Rushmore. And look at that. That's just deep. He just picks everyone apart. So the third member of the UFC Mount Rushmore, in my opinion, has to be none other than Conor McGregor. Yes, he lost to Khabib, and he lost to Nate, and he's had his losses, yes. But, I mean, he took out Alvarez beautifully. He took out Aldo in the quickest knockout in the UFC history at that time, and that record stayed with him for a while. Those are just a few reasons right there. To continue, I mean, if we want to talk about building the UFC, and if we want to talk in terms of pay-per-view numbers, out of the 13 top highest grossing or out of the top 13 UFC fights that had the highest amount of pay-per-views, Conor McGregor was involved in 8 of those. So he brought in big paydays. He attracted a lot of people to the sport. He brought up the competition level. He started off his career with capoeira, using those kicks, the spinning kicks. He described it as a baseball bat or a 9-iron attached to your heel or whatever. I don't know, but I just know he could talk. He built fights. He really added more energy to it. He brought a WWE style presence while also still being real. He's a funny guy. I think he did a lot for the UFC, so he has to be on the UFC Mount Rushmore, in my opinion. And actually, I was about to sign off and get to the next guy, but let's also not forget that he beat Alvarez, Poirier, Holloway, Nate Diaz, and another handful of named fighters who have skills. So I will let that be known. If we want to look at this fighting, I mean, look, he's an exciting fighter as well. He doesn't just grapple the whole time, which can sometimes, I think it's interesting when they grapple and it's entertaining, but a lot of people just want to see those high intensity fights. Here's one of his original fights kind of right here. This was back when he was coming up. I mean, look at that. He gets after it. He was a different animal kind of back then when he was in his prime. So I do have to say that Conor McGregor belongs on the UFC Mount Rushmore. I mean, he kept it exciting. That's at the very least. He made it exciting. Alright, guys. So now for the last fighter, the fourth fighter that's going to be on the UFC Mount Rushmore, or the last fighter that I think should be on the UFC Mount Rushmore, and it's none other than Khabib Nurmagomedov, or Habib Nurmagomedov. So, where to begin? Okay, so basically, let's just start off with the fact that this fighter is an absolute beast. He's wrestled with bears. He has all that hype behind him. But the important thing is he's a wrestler. That's what he does, and he's had the most takedowns in one UFC fight out of all UFC fights. He has the most takedowns in one fight. Okay, that's stat number 1 that I've got for you. This next stat I'm going to give you is it's going to be the fact that this guy, out of all fighters, the highest gate out of all fights and all fighters, the highest gate ever in UFC history, he was a fighter on it. Okay, that's another factor. So he played into the role of the UFC, the business aspect. He boosted that, and it really came from Conor McGregor. As we mentioned, Conor McGregor was on the Mount Rushmore, and them combined allowed there to be a highest gate out of all fights. That their combined efforts. Okay, and once again, Habib beat Conor. Okay, Habib beat Conor, so it's like, it's what can you do now? If he's beat Conor, then he kind of has to be on the Mount Rushmore. And oh yes, the biggest fact of all. Okay, this guy is undefeated. John Jones should be undefeated, but he had the disqualification. Habib has no disqualifications. He just retired undefeated. I mean, if we look in this fight right now, he's piecing his guys up. He can fight on the feet, but he's known for his wrestling. But if you think he can't fight on his feet, if you think this guy can't fight on his feet, well, I gotta tell you, he beat Conor on the feet. Conor backed up with this guy fighting on his feet. So keep that in mind. So, I mean, and here's another fight. He's going against Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson's a high-level fighter. And look, he's defending good, and he's getting hit hard. That was a hard hit. He did get hard. He does get hit hard. But he always recovers. There was one time where he's fighting Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier should have had that submission. He was cranking it. He had the choke, and it was going in hard. But then, surprise, surprise, Habib just brutes out of it. He goes in, and he dominates. He puts his energy on it. And here he's going against Michael Johnson. I think in this fight even, he says to Dana, I'm the best. I need the shot. I deserve this. He's a legendary fighter, so he has to be on the UFC Mount Rushmore. No questions asked. Undefeated and unchallenged, in my opinion. Alright, so that is my UFC Mount Rushmore, the top 4 fighters that I think should be on the UFC Mount Rushmore out of all fighters. If there were a UFC Mount Rushmore. I know you guys might have differing opinions. I know there's cases like GSP and Anderson Silva, and the list goes on. But those are who I thought, in my opinion, should be on the UFC Mount Rushmore if there were one. Thank you for watching. Drop your UFC Mount Rushmore in the description, and then drop a like and subscribe if you want to. I appreciate it, guys, and stay tuned for the next video.